I'm David Graeber from Neurotrek, and I'd like to welcome Moti today. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. It's been about, I don't know, a year or at least in the making. We've been all around the world in that time. So maybe you could start by telling us a bit about yourself and how you got into this whole wellness and holistic medicine journey.
So my name is Moti, and I'm teaching and developing a method called micromovement, basically. It started in the last few years, but basically the journey started when I started my younger journey. I was always very active physically since a very small age, martial arts, all that stuff, and then eventually yoga practicing, and then meditation, and creating this body-mind connection was something very natural to me. And it all came and boiled up into a concept of combining movement, breath practice, exposure to elements, and microdosing. To microdosing and psychedelics, I've reached in a very late age, only at the age of 38. And it came from a scientific background, from research background, not anything from parties or stuff like that. It was really not my way in life, although I'm not criticizing people that went on that path. It's just was not something I experienced much. And that's pretty much how I got this concept, how I combine, how I see everything is connected from our mental health, our physical health, and our achievements in life.
It's actually interesting. With regard to that, what do you see as healthy? What does healthy mean to you?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think it's also a question of what is enough. What is enough? You can always do more at something. You can always learn more. You can always get a better grade. You can always be more fit. If you run a marathon, you can run a half a marathon, then a marathon, then an ultra, then do an ultra every day. When is enough? Right? If you lift weights, you can lift more and more. If you want to be attractive, how attractive? You want to be the prettiest out of 100, out of 1,000, out of 10,000. There is always a question of what is enough, okay, that's good enough for me. And you can just say, no, that's good enough for me, or look at it in a more holistic approach and think of the concept of, in yogic science, as they call it, dharma, which is something like a purpose or your goal or purpose in life, something that you're meant to do. And it's tricky and very easily can be confused, but when you see it, most people would agree when they see it. Like when you see a gymnast doing a flawless routine in the Olympics, they're 24, everything they did in life was just for that moment. They're in their dharma, they're just fulfilling their potential. If it's a mother breastfeeding a child, she's fulfilling her potential, right? And we have many different purposes. If it's in relationships, if it's as a child needs to grow. When he's growing and learning, he's fulfilling his dharma, in a sense.
So you associate this purpose with being healthy, being able to fulfill the purpose? You need to be healthy enough to fulfill the purpose? Or do you see another dimension to health as well? Like, let's say you talked about the gymnast, so it's like more of a physical health situation. Do you see how would you see like a holistic perspective on someone's health?
That's where it becomes tricky, because if how healthy should you be as a mother? Healthy enough so your child will be able to grow with a mother, for example. But healthy physically, and also healthy mentally, right? And it's very hard to be mentally healthy when you're physically sick. Very, very hard. You have to transcend your pain and transcend physical limitations. It's not trivial. It usually won't happen. So yeah, you definitely have this. It's if a flower can grow just physically, Unlike flowers, you can grow physically and also mentally and also spiritually. It's amazing to see it, and we always have to go back to basics because it's very hard to be spiritual when you're starving.
Right. Well, actually, that brings me to I was thinking what we were talking about earlier about how people come to you, they want to be more healthy, they want to have an issue they want to address.
Yeah.
How do they get to you? What's the kind of pathway where someone could get to you?
So usually people come from, if you have to break it down to two, either you want to solve a problem or you want to improve. Some people want to alleviate suffering in some sense, you know, if it's anxiety and depression, if it's inflammation, if it's some other chronic disease, autoimmune disease, whatever. Or if they're okay, let's call it in a not negative balance, and they want to improve something. They want to become more attractive physically, they want to be more healthy, right? So it's improving something that is already working. And it's in a sense, it's just a continuum. It's a continuum on the same line, reducing suffering or improving. It's pretty much just a tipping point. But you know, at what point you're not happy, depressed, or happy? It's
Right.
It's not exactly black and white.
So what happens? They come to you, they want a problem to address. What's the journey look like from that point?
So there is always what I think they should have and do, but there is what they want. And what they want is stronger, right? Because if I'm going to divert your attention to something specific, let's think about our breath and the blood flow in our toes. For a few seconds you will be there, but if you have severe pain in your lower back or something else, or just worry about paying rent, right? Then that will direct your attention strong. It will have divert your attention quicker. And that's why it's not what I think they should focus on. It's the biggest focus they have now. That's what's going to take, and with this we're working, right? If someone is like, I have a problem in my relationships, I'm overweight, right? It's the biggest issue, and how we fix it, what we can change in our daily practice. We learn basic tools, you know, like how the practice empowers us, how we can work not through pain, but looking at pain as a teacher, not trying to get pain, but understand that it's a negative signal that we're doing something wrong, for example.
Okay. So, as from what I understand, you've got now about 7,000 people in your community of microdosing, and you've got a lot of people, you're going on retreats and things. I'd like to hear a bit about that, and how did some of these people that came to you for some guidance, how did you end up collecting them into a community? How did you engage? How do you engage with them? And what are some of the things that you've been doing around that, activities and retreats?
Yeah, so people come from, because the concept of micromovement has 4 different elements. People come from each element. Some people just want to go to ice baths. Some people want to do just the breath practice. Some want to do the movement or standing on their hands and stuff like that, or become more flexible. And some people want to do the microdosing. And I always try to show them a more balanced perspective using all of these tools in different volumes to adjust. And it's not one size fits all, right? Some people need more movement practice because they haven't moved most of their lives. Some people should do the cold exposure or not because they're not ready. Or
cold exposure being ice bath?
It could be ice bath, it could be even cold showers.
Oh wow, okay.
It could even be any exposure to elements. I think it's more important, the bigger concept is exposing yourself to elements, walking barefoot at the beach, right? Being connected to being connected to the elements.
So what does that have to do with microdosing? Yeah, I don't
Right, yeah. That's usually every time after people come to any movement session, they have this question before and after, they understand the answer intuitively.
But what is microdosing in the first place? How do
Wow.
we? Yeah.
Right. So what is microdosing? Microdosing is taking small amounts, tenths to a 20th of a psychedelic substance intermediately for long periods of time. Dosages should be high enough to improve your daily function, but low enough so it does not impair your conscious awareness or functions. It's a very, very, very subtle line, and most people just think, oh yeah, you just take a little bit of psychedelics, just small amounts, and you're going to be fine. No, it's much, much more complicated, and it's a very, it's a tool to fine-tune yourself. It's very easy to fall to the placebo effect and just believe that you're taking a holy mushroom and it's going to make you better. And sometimes it does in the background. I think it's a pretty childish approach because if things change, you should be aware of them, even if it's in a cellular level, if it's in a neurological level. There are changes that you can see, right? Some people don't notice their heartbeat. It doesn't mean that their heartbeat is not there and you can't sense it, right? And some people can just close their eyes and notice their heartbeat and even their blood flow. So that's a bit of a shift of awareness, and that's where microdosing comes in handy. Basically, it's like opening a valve, your sensory valve. So your senses are a bit more open, not crazily more open like in a big journey, right? What we know. If it's 20% more, if it's 15% more, then you can actually perform better. You can make better decisions, you can be more creative, you can be more energetic, you have even more clarity about what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong.
What about honesty?
That's that, exactly. Yeah. You can physically feel it, right? When you're half honest with yourself and just saying stuff, when you're giving excuses, physically you can feel that you're weaker. And microdosing helps to amplify it. And then when you say something or do something, you can work out because you're less secure and just you work out because you need more muscle, because you're basically believe that you're incompetent and loser, right? Or you can work out because you love life and you just want to help people.
It sounds like it comes back to your original thing. What does healthy mean to you? If you want to fulfill your purpose, you need to be healthy enough to fulfill the purpose. Yeah. But just going back to walking around barefoot on the sand and being exposed to those elements, what's the relationship between that and micro movement and microdosing?
I think it's first we need to understand what is the concept of self and our limitations of self. At the beginning, when we're children, we barely can identify ourselves. We don't call ourselves when we're 4, we're not I'm Jewish or I am Israeli or Palestinian or whatever, you're a child, right? And slowly we develop our ego, their sense of I-ness, what I see as I, perceive as I. And with microdosing, with psychedelics, the sense of I we can reform it and see it in a broader picture, right? Because a mother and a child is almost the same thing, right? Most mothers will see a baby and will say, it's me, it's part of me. Well, a few months ago it was, right, technically. And slowly it becomes a different entity, and then you have a mother and a child, and then you have a family and a community and the entire world, and plants and animals and the sand. And seeing what's connected and what is the same with me and the environment gives you a total different experience of the world, right? If it's a tree that I'm exhaling CO2 and the tree is breathing the CO2 and exhaling oxygen, we have some symbiosis here. And my dead body is going to be food for the trees, and the trees then are going to be food for humans. Everything is connected.
So having this idea or this awareness of that connection, how does that improve one's health?
A lot of our sicknesses and suffering comes from not understanding the world around us. And it's a hard thing to say because some people just have tragedies in their lives that are not in their immediate, it's not immediate result of their actions. For example, if you have a kid that is dying since he was born, you're suffering, and it's very hard to tell you that you're the fault for something like that. But as much as we understand the world better, we can adapt to it, we can expect what's going to happen, we can become more resilient, and then we're more healthy, right? Let's say that a camel understands the desert much better than a human. Physically, it understands it because it's more adaptive, right? And is less sick in the desert compared to a human that will die a few days without water. So I hope I could answer it.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a relationship between the environments in which we find ourselves in and being able to understand those environments so that we can properly adapt the way that we interact with the environment so that we are healthier ourselves. But I think what I was curious about, one thing you said with like the camel and the water, and then how people come to you on your journey, on their journeys to health. And I mean, a lot of people are a little bit nervous reluctant to enter into this, like, I guess, psychedelic, plant-based medicine world. Ice baths and, breath work. It's a lot of it's seen quite as it's hard work, and it's not necessarily something people know a lot about yet.
And being honest, it's even harder because you always have to be honest. And then honesty is hard work. Yeah.
Right. So this is what I wanted to get to. It was when you were saying about regarding the honesty and the plant-based medicine and the ability to become healthy. How is it in your practice that you try to incorporate these ideas, and what does it look like in a practice?
It takes me back to pain as a teacher. When we're facing pain, we need to be honest because we can ignore it. Some people just trying to believe that pain is good in a sense, which is not. But we also need to adapt correctly if we're honest, right? Because some people just say, no, I'll strive through the pain and it's going to be good. On other people are just lazy, right? So it's a very, very fine line between, no, I'm not going to push myself because it hurts and I'm being lazy, or I'm pushing myself too much. Conscientious people usually would do it, push themselves over the real limitations they have.
Right.
Yeah. You can. Most CrossFitters destroy their joints. Most bodybuilders destroy their joints, especially if they do enhance their bodies with anabolic steroids.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
So what does a program kind of look like to incorporate these different elements?
So the basic is, I don't want to call it functional movement, but it's more like movement intelligence and basic, getting up from the floor. Sometimes it looks some silly and stupid and basic especially if you're young and healthy. But for most 80-year-old people, getting up from the floor is not simple. And even for many sanitarian 30-year-old that are maybe a bit overweight or inflexible, which is also not a good concept, saying, no, I'm inflexible, not flexible enough. So even for 30-year-old people, you see that getting up from the floor is a chore. It's not so simple. But we do need it. Our basic function to be able to breathe easily, calmly, to be able to sit without pain, to be able to be I'm not talking about meditation yet, just to be able to concentrate for 15 minutes.
Right.
To calm down the mind's anxiety, of course. So the physical practice is, you know what? You can look about it as an antenna. Our body is an antenna, and we need to fix to make it more straight, so it will
fine-tune it,
so it will get information and receive and transmit information correctly. So we need to fine-tune the body. Some people need to become stronger, some more flexible, understanding what we get in, what we get out. It's in yoga they call it prana and apana, but basically if it's waste that comes out and energy that comes in, needs to be balanced. And then you incorporate it with breath practice, and breath practice is huge just for everything. Maybe it will help you understand how I view breath practice. It's very hard to control the breath pattern when you sleep, right? But even that can be changed. One of the biggest breath practices I'm doing is when I'm riding my motorcycle. I'm doing a breath practice that makes me lower down, because my tendency is to get hyped and ride faster, and someone just ran faster than me, I want to catch him. That's my stupid tendency. And then I'm doing the breath practice to calm down the mind, to ride safer, right? Because my aim is to get somewhere. And if I'm going to crash, I didn't fulfill my aim, right? It could be faster or slower, but eventually there is some mental process that is going behind, and the emotion is high, especially when you're on a motorcycle and there's huge vehicles next to you that can kill you, that anxiety can really come up. So breath practice.
So breath practice in terms of, I understand the traditional idea of regulating your breath to calm yourself down. That makes sense to me, but...
Or also give energy.
And give energy, but I think if I understood you correctly, you can even use breath work to induce psychedelic states.
Oh yeah, definitely. If it's going to be on a scale, I would say that with intense breath practice, you can reach small, maybe not even small, it could be even very dramatic psychedelic levels, but not for a very prolonged time. And also it requires a lot of...
How long are we talking?
Let's say if you're doing a 45 to 1 hour breathwork session, intense, with a lot of intentions, and when you're all in, it could be life-changing. The afterglow and the aura effect and the euphoric effect stays for a few hours after. Some people even have closed eye visuals with breath practice, which is the beginning of fractals, right? And if you go to the more extreme ends, but if you try...
What's a fractal?
Fractal is shapes. That's what most people see when they use psychedelics like psilocybin or LSD or dimethyltryptamine. You start with seeing some fractal shapes, which are not hallucinations. They are stuff we cannot really understand, but they're not exactly hallucinations.
And that's through just breath work, you're saying?
Yeah, definitely. It happens through breath work. Also could be from shamanic drum meditation.
But I just want to go back to that. Is there a relationship between the breath work and, let's say, a microdosing regimen? Can the breath work in tandem with, I don't know, ice bath as well maybe, and the psychedelic plant-based medicine? Is there a relationship between improving the efficiency of it, or?
Yeah, so one of the core concepts of combining breath in micro-movement, which combines movement, breath work, and psychedelics also, is take in a microdose, the idea is you want the minimal help that you need. So some people need to take half a gram or 1 gram at the beginning. 1 gram is not a microdose at all, and then some people can take 0.3 or 0.2. And you want to be able to see that you sense more, right? How much more depends on you, but you want to notice that you sense more than usual, and eventually, all the time, you're sensing a bit more, right? So your awareness is more open. That's the difference between taking a normal drug that works only when you take it, to a psychedelic that changes your sensory perception, and then you can not take it and still feel like you're microdosing, basically. So the breath practice helps to give focus on the microdosing, or you can call it the opposite. The microdosing helps to enhance the breath practice. I'm not sure who would you put first, but basically start with microdosing, wait around something like 15 minutes, and then do a breathwork session of at least something like 20 minutes. It depends. There are a few different types of breath practices. And then you'll notice the microdosing much, much stronger than you would notice it if you wouldn't take it. That also helps, because many people just think that they're not supposed to feel microdosing, and it's not exactly the case.
Would you say that people that are new to it, is there any indications or factors that you would say, look, this isn't microdosing or psychedelics in general, and they're not good for you? Maybe it could be a circumstance, it could be a point in time, or are there any other factors except for a point in time where you would look at and say, look, I'm not saying this is something that's going to be really, definitely do damage to you, but you're at a high risk, and I'm not going to recommend that you look into that further?
There are many. Okay, first of all, if you're very young, I think that these are very strong and potent tools. And first, you should facilitate the basic tools, which is basic mental health, basic movement, and breath practice. If you have these and working hard, willing to work hard, I think that's more important, because if not, you're just trying to find a shortcut with psychedelics.
So you're saying the intention behind why someone starts. But what about besides the intention?
Yeah, beside that, so that's a matter of
Like it's not a recreation anymore, I'm not trying to have fun, I really want to work on myself, I want to be more healthy. You said that I can improve my awareness, my focus, my energy.
Yeah. So, okay, other than that, so if you have, some people are just looking for experience. And that's also, experience is like fun. And if it's fair that it's a part of it, but if it's the main objective, then it's definitely not it's not going to do the job. Other than that, many people with depression or anxiety are looking for it, and in a sense, it makes sense, because we do know from the research that psilocybin can help depression. But also you need to be in a stable, depressed way. Some people, there is a difference between depression that you have for 3 years, and then you can be depressed for 3 years, but now you're in a catatonic state. And you need some level of stability, right? Because they say, yeah, I'm depressed, but it's pretty much stable for the last 3 months. That's a good time. That's a good way to start, but not when you're like,
so volatile levels of depression.
Is not the time to start microdosing, definitely. Also emotional volatility, like if someone is after a big breakdown or a divorce, it's not when you first want to encounter it. If you already know these tools, then maybe it could help. But a general rule of thumb, don't learn 2 new things at the same time. Right?
What about, let's say someone comes to you and they have experienced some trauma. For example, right now in the country, there's a lot of trauma, and it's significant trauma. And they've heard about some of the benefits that they can gain from either microdosing or not even microdosing. It could be macrodosing and breath work and other things like that. How would you suggest someone who's just experienced a trauma would start their journey?
So people that experience trauma also have different, very, very different levels of consciousness, or let's just say adulthood. Some people are more aware and can be really detached in a sense, but look at it from a more reasonable way. And some people are so much into the trauma that it's enmeshed with their personality, and psychedelics could even harm them at that point, because they're not in a point where they need more instability, in a sense.
Okay, so you're saying it goes back to that volatile.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So some on the other hand, it can really help because the trauma is also being the trauma sinks in the weeks after the event.
Yeah,
right?
being formed.
Yeah, exactly. It's formed and changes your habits and perceptions and your thought patterns. And then a psychedelic session could really prevent these from being formed.
But I mean, it seems to be there's a dilemma there. There's a contradiction where you have, at the same time, you said they're going to have some volatility in their emotional state directly after trauma. However, at the same time, the trauma is forming itself. So how could someone navigate a situation like that? What are some suggestions and tips to be safe around that, but get some effective treatment as well?
Don't deep dive too quickly.
Right.
That's definitely a situation. There is a big difference from 0.3 and 2.3, right?
Right.
And you can see if someone is okay.
You mean grams of
psilocybin?
Yeah.
If it's slightly enhancing your sensual your sensory perception, that's not dangerous, even for traumatized people, probably. It depends. But generally, if they're in a safe place, in a safe environment, and only what you call it microdosing or a bit more, then it's like they went one floor up.
Right.
And then the second.
So okay, so let's say someone, I'm also curious with regards to when someone's already on prescription medication. For example, they're taking SSRI, antidepressant medication, or benzos, or whatever it is, and they want to stop doing that, and they'd like to start, as you said, taking some ownership over their own health and getting some balance in there. How does one move from that sort of traditional treatment? Does it interact well with psychedelic medicine? Does someone have to wean off? What's the relationship between traditional Western medicine, pharmaceuticals, and psychedelic medicine?
I'll give two parts of the answer. The first part is, so basically both SSRIs and psychedelics run on the same neurotransmitters, the 5-HT2A receptors, which are the serotonin receptors. And that's why usually SSRIs reduce the effect of classic psychedelics, serotonergic psychedelics. And it's not necessarily risky combining them, but it just reduces the effect. That's, I would say, the scientific answer. But I think that before that, there is it made me understand, dealing with people with depression, anxiety, that taking any other kind of form of pill, that my profession is the opposite. I'm not dealing with sickness. I'm dealing with the opposite of sickness. I'm not dealing with anxiety. I'm dealing how to build resilience. I'm not dealing with depression. I'm dealing with seeing how to see the beauty in life. And that's what I'm doing. And if you are more resilient, you'll be less anxious. If you see beautiful things in everything you do in life, I think you can not be depressed. So it's a total paradigm shift. I'm not dealing with depression. I'm dealing with how to become happy. And in that sense, I don't know exactly, because these are not, I'm not a therapist. I know how to treat myself. And how I treat myself is what I'm teaching, so people can treat themselves. In a sense, we're our own doctors, and we need to take some ownership, basic ownership on our health, physical and mental health. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go to a doctor, but when you go to a garage with your car and say, "Hi, fix my car," right? Okay, but if it's your body, and no doctor is gonna fix your body if you don't know what's the problem.
Yeah, you need to be your own healthcare provider.
Exactly, we're our own healthcare provider, which we talked about, the funny word, healthcare provider. I need to buy some health.
Yeah, provide me some healthcare, please.
Yeah. And yeah, it's a big shift, and it's not fun because people have huge ownership and responsibility when they say it. Some things like it. But
I actually wanted to bring up that point about PTSD again and recent events. I was wondering, how do you see, like sometimes we know we're about to encounter a traumatic situation, whether it's I can hear the sirens for the rockets coming, or it's a military exercise or something else. We know we're about to encounter a situation which is going to trigger something.
Trigger some
What
past.
What can we? It could be that, or whatever you want to, how you want to classify that. Are there any suggestions or tips you can provide to proactively address that impending trauma?
So, again, if it's an impending trauma, and let's say it's a siren, or siren is a good example because the siren itself is not dangerous. It's just the implication of what's going to happen after the sirens, or what the sirens indicated. And there is my physical well-being and safety, that I know that, let's say there is a missile that is coming, and there is the decision I made to live where I live. And if I'm honest and 100% behind it, then okay, so which I am, by the way, then I can say, okay, so I go to a shelter. That's what I can do. Then I'm reducing the risk in a sufficient level that I'm living with the consequences. It means that there are chances I'm going to die, right? And it's okay. And they shouldn't be crazy risks, right? If it's extremely dangerous, then you're just always under fight-flight mode. And so there is a point where you need a little bit detachment from the fact that dying is not the worst thing. We want to live, right? But if a soldier dies protecting his country, it's not the worst thing that could happen, and many people do it willingly. So it helps kind of reduce the anxiety in a sense. And also detach from the noise, because some people can't even hear fireworks because they've experienced something in the past, and now there is no threat. Just brings up the memory of threat, and immediately the body reacts. And that, I think that the only solution is to solve the original trauma and face it. It's unpleasant. Some PTSD treatments with MDMA does the trick. Some do it with ayahuasca. Some do it with psilocybin. I know even Holocaust survivors that did special treatments in Holland with LSD. These are different tools that can help you deal with the trauma and reprocess it in a way that it's digestible, and you can accept the world and continue without trauma.
Okay. But what about proactively? So, for example, I know I'm going to be shipped off back to base, and God forbid I have to go into war. I know it's going to be dangerous. The fight or flight mode will kick in. Is there anything I can do, maybe during the event, before the event? I understand after the event, there are things to do, but during and before.
Before the event. So as long as, first of all, before any type of visualization of what's going to happen is going to make it less traumatic. Let's say you can visualize it exactly, or even worse than it's going to be. Then when it happens, it's not a trauma, it's easy, right?
Like visualize a worse scenario that could possibly happen.
Exactly, and be prepared for a worse scenario. I'm not saying it's the best solution, because then you can easily become a prepper and a doomsday scenario person. But in these cases, it's better to over-prepare than under-prepare. Under-prepare is death.
Are there any plant-based medicine tricks? I guess I'm trying to lead you into that. Is there anything in that space where you've had experience or seen people?
Well, of course. Seeing the more extreme scenario with psychedelics enables you to do it in a much, much deeper way. Right? You can do it without, but we have our own limitation of concentration and sensory perception and bringing up back memories and.
You mean having a psychedelic state during, like actually?
Exactly.
Oh, wow, during, okay, and that may help process it, you're saying?
We're not talking about processing; it's about preparing ourselves to an event, right? If you are even imagining a situation and you're imagining what's going to happen and what could happen, many people are traumatized not from what happened to them, but from what they have done. Soldiers, many soldiers are traumatized from what they have done, and understand what you can do. That's a big thing. And then when you do it, you're not traumatized because you're honest with yourself. Many people also have guilt and shame from saving themselves and not saving others. And that's also something that should be processed, of course. But any psychedelic experience before that could really, really help us explore our limitations, the rivals' limitations, and the situation together.
Interesting. That's interesting, because it's not intuitive to think that before you're going into a situation that's going to be really intense, to try and put yourself there in advance. You'd think one time's enough. I won't do it twice, but preparing for it kind of, I guess, helps you adjust when it actually happens.
I'll give you a good analogy. An amazing analogy. I think it's also called hormesis, and basically it's slow exposure. That's basically the idea of trauma, of any trauma, but it's building resilience before the trauma. So Jonathan Haidt is a psychologist. He talked about it. There was a fascinating experience called the Bamba experiment. Bamba is a peanut-based snack common in Israel. And there was a British scientist that noticed that the Jews in Britain have much higher rate of peanut allergy compared to the Jews in Israel. And basically it's the same genetics. What's the difference? And then you thought, maybe it's Bamba. In Israel they have Bamba, which is basically a very low dose of peanuts.
And it's delicious.
Yeah. And it's being given for children. So they did an experiment, a five-year experiment. They took 400 pregnant women, all have the gene for peanut allergy. They broke them into two groups. One group told them, avoid anything that is connected to peanuts when you're during pregnancy, and when you're breastfeeding, don't give peanuts to your baby or anything like that. The other group, eat Bamba and give your baby Bamba. 5 years later, the group that had avoided Bamba had 17% peanut allergy, and the group that were given Bamba had 3% peanut allergy, right? So it's a future trauma or future experience that will generate allergy. It's pretty much like war in a sense, and you prepare yourself for it.
That's interesting. Okay. Well, that's all I wanted to talk to you about today. I'm curious about a few other things you're doing in your actual sessions, but maybe we'll do another conversation about each one of those, particularly the ice baths and how they relate to psychedelic medicine. But thank you very much. Really appreciate